So, I'm Sue Greenwood, I'm from Staffordshire University, and if you're wondering why there's somebody from university here, my background is actually I'm a journalist, I've been a news editor, and I've been an editor right across most of the media. So I've worked in newspapers, I've worked in websites, I've done all of that. The reason I'm actually here at a kind of gaming event is I'm also the course leader for the UK's only degree in games journalism and PR. And what that means for the industry is I'm working really, really hard to make sure that there's a whole bunch of new people coming into the industry who really are trained journalists, trained PRs, but trained journalism and PR knowing absolutely everything about games. So they work really closely with our games people, and they're working with that as well. So that's kind of why I'm here. So I'm going to do the same thing with everybody else, which is to ask them to tell you who they are and what they do at their organisation and why they're here today. Are we all right with that, Jackie?
Thank you, Sue. I'm Jackie Vors. I'm from Demoso, which is the world's best PR agency for for games, for mobile games particularly. Yeah, we've specialised in this area for, I would say, 5 years now. So we were right at the beginning of this industry. I'm going to hand you over to Harry, who has actually been a colleague of mine over the years. So.
Yeah, hi, my name's Harry Cole. I've been freelancing PR for about 5 years now. Lucky enough to work with Jackie not so long ago, which is great to be set up here with her as well. I'm now at Edelman and doing some work on Xbox, but a lot of my experience comes in mobile gaming and technology.
I'm Craig Chappell. I'm senior editor of PocketGamer.biz, which I hope you recognise from being at this conference today. And I also oversee InfluencerUpdate.biz, which is our new website dedicated to the world of influencers and influencer marketing. I've been doing this for about 6 years. I used to work at Develop Magazine. I had some time at Nintendo, and for about the last year and a half, I've been at Steel Media.
I'm Harry Slater. I'm the deputy editor of PocketGamer.co.uk, the editor of 148 Apps, and to do a variety of things all across the Steel Media B2C network. Again, been doing it for about 6 years now, written for a large variety of publications about mobile games, and have probably played more mobile games than most people in the world.
Okay, thank you. And obviously now you know who you are, hopefully you're going to stay in the room for a bit longer. You'll notice I've helpfully put them in order of their name. So if, like me, you kind of wander in and think, who was that person who just spoke? It's all they're in that order, okay? So one of the things I want to find out now is who you guys are. So how many of you in the room are on the production side, i.e. you're making games, or you're involved in building games, or you're basically at that side of creating the product? Okay. We got anyone in the room who's on the promotional side, i.e. your press, your PR, you're doing marketing? Okay, right. Oh, so actually a bit of a mix. I was sort of thinking if it went one particular way, I would kind of skew things that way. I'm going to start with one question to the panel, and then I'm going to start asking questions of you guys, okay? And my question is, rather than how to work with the media, how not to work with the media? What's the worst thing you can do, particularly if you're a developer and you're trying to get the media interested? I'm going to start with you, Jackie.
Okay. Don't randomly send messages via email, filling up a very busy journalist's inbox with irrelevant stuff that's immediately going to get deleted. You have to appreciate, you have to put yourself in other people's shoes and appreciate that they are seeing, as you said, Harry, a lot of games, having to review a lot of games, having to look at a lot of information all the time, and just be very appreciative that that person has their life, and look at what they're doing and understand what they're interested in, and then maybe try to make a contact that is meaningful and valuable to them, rather than just sends out some spurious press release.
Yeah, I think Jackie hit the nail on the head there, really. But the other side of that is to try to build relationships and to make sure what you're sending is relevant. Because sometimes I think people rush into thinking, contact many people and see what happens. But it's not really a numbers game. It's more of a build relationships. You're better off speaking to 3 to 5 people that actually want what you're doing, rather than sending out 100 emails and not even getting any responses. And then the next time, an even smaller number of people want to hear from you.
one of the worst things you could do is, I appreciate if you're trying to tell someone about your new product or your new game, you're very excited about it, and you want to tell them absolutely everything that's great about it. But what you need to do is you need to send like a very short email and with like a link to pictures or a video or something. If you've got paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs that explain every feature, I get so many emails a day, I just don't have time to like read it all. So that's a big mistake that I see quite often, and unfortunately, often it means it doesn't get read.
I think for me, if I get an email that starts "Dear Editor," I'm going to delete it instantly. That's pretty much it. It's incredibly. As journalists, we all have massive egos, and we like to be pampered and told we're special and the best. So if an email is clearly a form email, then I feel horrible about myself for an hour, and I don't like that.
That's a good. Okay, so those of you in the audience who said that you're on the production side, on the development side, have you made any of those mistakes so far? You're not going to own up to them? Okay. I've got another question then for you. How easy do you find it yourselves to make those relationships with the media? Those of you that are on the development side, have you kind of started doing that yet? Found it easy? Found it difficult? Come on, it's audience participation. I go, okay, I'm going that way. Okay.
The thing is, when you launch the game, of course you would like things move faster, but what you said is we need to put on the other's shoes, of course, right? So you need to understand that they cannot reply at the right time. One thing that I try to do, but it's very hard. I hate to send that PRs or that emails that are always the same stuff. I always go very personal. I see what that, like on your case, I know almost all of your reviews, of course. But I try to see what that people write about, right? And then to try to reach out, grabbing some relationship, right? But it's not easy. Because what you're saying is correct, but it's hard. It's a long time job. But imagine that you launch a game, right? And you really are expecting that on that week or on that month that is going up, and everybody know about what you have been working for 1-2 years. So it's both ways.
It's a really difficult thing because it's your passion.
Yep.
You know, you've put all that time into it, you've put all that effort into it, and all you want to go is and this and that, and it's quite tough. And I was on a similar panel in PG Connects Helsinki, which is a great. I'm going to put a big advert for that because it's a brilliant show. But I was in a similar panel. I was with a guy called Keith Stewart, who was a freelance journalist, and what he said to me was, yes, it is difficult for those relationships to be made very, very quickly as you want them to be. But one thing he said, which really resonated with me, is he said, if you can tell a really interesting story that will make you just take some notice. And he was saying a story about a guy who was developing games in Iceland or something, in an igloo or something. But it just really captured his interest, and it really made him remember that guy and remember that person and want to write about that guy's games. So maybe that's the way to get over the wanting to get that quick connection to actually make a really relevant and interesting story.
I mean, one thing I would say is, as obviously you've been working on a game for 2 years, don't come to us at the end of the 2 years. Come and say, I'm building this. Like shows like this and PGC and Helsinki and all the other places are great to come and get early builds into our hands to put big. I mean, obviously one of the big problems is email is very impersonal, but if I get an email saying, hi Harry, I saw your panel at whatever, and then that's a link to something that I've done that remember and put a face to a name. So I think even though we're journalists, like we want to be there for you at every stage, not just the end. If you come to us at the end saying, I've released this game, and sometimes I get emails that it's like, oh, I released this game a week ago, and it's like, I don't care anymore. It's a week ago. This is mobile gaming. Like everything before that is the really interesting stuff with if I'm excited about your game and then I want to write about it and make other people excited about it, but a week after it's come out and it's missed its feature on the App Store or whatever, then it's not news to me anymore. It's not worthy of. Well, it might be worthy of review, but 8 other games have come out in the time that yours has been out. So make sure you're always updating us and telling us, and even if you don't get replies, just keep saying, now we've got build 3 and this is adding new features. And so it's almost like you're creating the story for us rather than coming at the end and saying, here is the game.
What's your name?
Noon.
And what's your game, Noon? I think I know this because you've already...
Yeah. I try to go a different route.
Yeah.
Puzzle AR.
Okay.
Augmented reality game.
Okay, so obviously when you contact Harry, he'll know exactly who you are as well. I think what you said about picking your journalist is actually really quite important, and I thought, so I'm sure you'd say that as well. And being able to massage Harry's enormous ego by being able to say what are the really good reviews that you've read of him, or the stuff, because we know what's our good work, and we really like to know that somebody else has noticed that as well. And even things like Keith Stewart, knowing that he was from, Guardian and all of that kind of stuff, knowing our backstories as a journalist, it also helps. But actually what Jackie was saying, which is what we really want to get to as a journalist, is the story of why you made that game. That's the most important thing that matters. In some ways it's more important than the game itself, is being able to have that backstory around you and why you're kind of hassling everybody and driving all over the place trying to say, play my game, play my game. We need to kind of know that it's not just about buy my game, that there's a reason why you want us to play your game. There's somebody over here had the hand up, wanted to say that they had got some contacts with the media as well. A developer? No? Okay. Right, okay. Going to go with another question then, and this is another one for the developers in the audience. Have you ever been knocked back by the media or a journalist? Have you ever had that kind of sending emails out and not getting a response and not knowing why? Any of you had that? Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think you expect that. My last game, I sent out about...
What was your game, by the way?
It was called Minutes, which
Minutes? Okay.
Harry might remember, but probably not. Yeah, that was...
Yeah.
That was on PlayStation. Yeah, I mean, I personalised all of those. I got about a 40% hit rate, and I got a bunch of good reviews and stuff. So I felt that it worked. But yeah, you can't expect to get a response to everything. So I think that's fine. And I didn't feel bad about it. I was like, well, I've got some responses.
Okay, so and since then, how's it? Have you had better
I've
response?
done work for hire since then, so I haven't done the game after that yet. Working towards that, so we'll see. Things have changed, but all the advice. It's similar advice to what I heard before, but it's good to hear that it's kind of the same and the same approach.
So far what we've got in terms of advice is get to know the journalist and their work, have a bit of a backstory yourself. One of the other things I'd ask is whether, and I think it kind of came up a little bit, is whether the timing, you mentioned about not coming to us at the end of the process and that. Are there kind of key points when it's better to contact the media within that whole process, would you say? Did you want to pick? Yeah.
Maybe not quite an answer to that question, but I would say that coming to events is actually really important. Events that journalists go to, because I know a bunch of developers that I've probably been speaking to for years now, and they still haven't released their games. But every time we see each other at events, like, oh hi, how's it going? Oh, how's that game going? So we've already built up a weird rapport of just meeting each other at events. But now possibly when their game is going to be released, I'll be like, oh, I remember you, and I'll give them probably a bit more time than I might give someone else, which sounds really harsh, but they have made the effort to actually build up that rapport, get that game in my mind, and just constantly thinking about it.
I was just going to say that in terms of when to contact press, I think sometimes it can be really good to start thinking about your marketing, which is essentially what it is, from the moment you start to make a game. You could speak to a journalist in the initial stages when you're talking about your project's conception, and you could get an idea of whether they think it's interesting at that point. It can decide your entire, whether you make the game or not. And that sounds quite brutal, but it's you've got to think about what people are looking for, and if they're not looking for your type of game, or you don't have the story that's going to really create a lot of interest, use it to shape what you're going to create.
Yeah, total segue from what you were saying is a lot of particularly the indie game developers, the big guys get this right actually. They manage to see things out, create a buzz because they've got the budget to do it, but also they've got the confidence to do it. Yeah. And I think when you're an indie developer, you just don't want to lay yourself bare. You don't want to say, hey, these are the starts of, this is the root of my game, I'm not quite sure if it's all right, it's buggy, all those things that are going on within a game that you're not necessarily quite proud about. So a lot of people just hold back. They put all of their effort and their money and time into getting the game perfect, and then by the time they've got it done, everyone's like, why didn't you tell me about this before? So it's kind of like, have the confidence to lay yourself bare and show things while they're in development, because we all know that it's never going to be perfect from day one, and no game is perfect even from day one, is it? I mean, they're constantly under development and improvement. So I think people need to be a little bit more confident when they come forward first.
Okay. Which kind of leads me... Sorry, do you know what's... Yeah? Yeah?
My name is Stella. I'm CEO of Desert based in California. Based on what you guys said, the 7 I talked to you guys earlier, but how can I prepare you guys that you guys are not going to dislike the idea when we are in the very early stage, and how can we actually present it better that get your interest, that you actually don't misleading your idea at that moment? Because I think for developers, it's always, what's the right time to talk to you guys?
I think, from my point of view, as a writer, I understand that the criticism of the finished product doesn't begin at the start, if you see what I mean. So if you come to me with a game that you say, look, this is built, it might do this, it might do that, and I play it and I see the germ of the idea there, and I'm always happy to talk about games, because I think that's one thing a lot of people forget, is that most people got into games journalism because they love games. So I'm not going to pick apart a build that's in the early stages of it, because that's not. I don't want to destroy things. I want to make sure that when you've got a great idea, and I want to make sure that it's the best idea when it comes out, because I like writing nice reviews. I don't like going. Well, actually, there's so many times that I've written a review and been like, if you'd have just sent me an email, I could have. No, don't do that. Put that there. Unfortunately, I've no talent in actually making things. But I think if you can't be scared to bring out it at any point. One thing I would say is sometimes if someone says, oh, I've got a game to show you, and it's just some slides, I'll forget about it because it's just pictures. But get the game in our hands as soon as you think you want to, basically.
The first MVP, really.
Yeah.
Like the first time we would actually be showing that. Sorry, just asking this from my perspective. Would you say that would be at the first MVP, like the first, when you would be showing that and testing that with people, with audiences, yourself, internally, or maybe with friends and family, that would be the time really to put it out to you guys?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, like, I think especially with smaller indie developers, they'll come with a game that they've spent years working on, but they've only ever had their mum and dad play it, and their mum and dad are probably lovely people, but they don't know as much about mobile games as I do. So I think it's even from a writing point of view, just getting something out there is a terrifying thing, and saying this is a thing what I have done, what my team has done, but we're not going to try and destroy your career or your lives, basically.
I'm going to just ask you a follow-up question, and then I'll come to the chap over there. Is the fear that you will end up with negative press, and that will follow you forever, kind of thing?
I don't think it's negative feedback that's fear us. It's more about
how do you prepare people that doesn't know what you're trying to build? How do you best prepare them in a very short paragraph? Because in the beginning, you guys mentioned that people tend to write a lot of feature brief, and then when we are in the development stage, you kind of think that, okay, we still have 5 months until we reach to the goal. But do we want to show this? Doesn't show the final concept, and how do we actually talk to the media press? I think that's kind of preparation work that we don't know how to deal with media press from developer point of view. And the reason I'm sticking here because I'm charging the phone, not because I don't want to. Not because I'm afraid of you. It's just charging the phone. Yeah.
Hiding behind the chair.
I will say that one tactic that I've always found in PR is the kind of like, how would you tell someone about it in a pub concept, which is, you know, similar to the lift concept of you've only got 5 seconds. But if you can sort of summarize the idea early on, or a stage in the game's development or publicity or marketing, where you can get the idea across as quickly as possible, and for someone to understand it and like it, then you're in a really good place to build on that.
And similarly, we worked on a CCG. I think we were working together on this on Earth Core, Shattered Elements.
No,
that was a bit before. But anyway, it's a CCG. It was coming up against Hearthstone, and the way that we kind of communicated it was not only just through the gameplay, the MVP, but it's also through the artwork, because it was a collectible card game. So we pushed out a lot of the artwork to create a buzz, to introduce people to it properly. So as much as you can do visually is really, really important, because it's not just words. I think you guys must get so blasted with words and words and words, and just show us a trailer, show us a video, and that, you know, that will show us what your concept is, even if you haven't quite built it yet.
Okay, guy there had a question.
I was just going to give you this from my perspective, because my day job, I produce programs for the BBC, so there's the sports programs, but I'm also developing games, so they're sports-themed games, so I'm kind of seeing it from both perspectives. So as a journalist, I think the relationships are, well, there's 3 things. One, I'd say the relationships, because the people who get the best access on the show that I produce, they're the people we know, you know, and they can call me up.
Yeah, typical BBC.
They'll you know, they'll.
Are you an NFL right now?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, okay.
But you know, relationship got to on there.
You know, they could take you out for coffee or go drinking, but like you said, come to events like this where you actually see people and speak to them. So that's an ongoing relationship. Story, you know, have a great story. And journalists are, you know, quite often they're lazy people. They'd rather a good story fell into their lap than they go around, you know, spending all hours trying to find a story. So if somebody comes to me with a great story, you know, that makes my life so much easier. And if they bought me a meal as well, great, you know, and a drink. But
yeah,
the other thing is the other thing's the timing, because you know you could have a great relationship with me, you could have a great story, but if I'm not doing that story that particular week, it's not going to work. But in 3 or 4 weeks' time, you know, we could be covering whatever it is. So let's say in a games perspective, if it's I'm looking for indie games about pets, for example. It may not work this week, but in 2 weeks' time, we want to cover that story. So I think there's those 3 things.
Okay.
Which is kind of echoing what you've said.
Okay,
Anyway.
Thank you. I said it was
We'll
an
talk NFL
open panel.
later.
Did you? Sorry, did.
Yeah, a question. Going a bit sideways, but so sometimes you're not just marketing game. Maybe you would like to get your company story out, or you've raised funding, or there are other types of news. So does that like differ somehow from you know, the game pitching, and what should be done differently if the story is about the team, new company, you know, other milestones?
When it's like a new company, personally, I'm always very happy with an exclusive. So if you come to me and say, oh look, we're starting this new company, we've got this funding, then that's great. That will any publication will probably, that's a B2B, will be very interested in that. I think a lot of things are very similar though. So again, you wouldn't like send an email that is just like paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of just endless stuff about your company. But right at the start, it has to be, oh, this is what we're doing. This is who it is. Does that sound of interest? And then we can get the conversation going after that, which might sound weird because then the next email is probably going to be paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff. But you have to get that opening response, and the amount of emails you get a day, the amount of stories you have to think about, and you have to think about, oh, what am I going to cover? Do I cover that? Do I cover that? Like, the best way to do it is a short email explaining like the best things about what you're doing.
So again, I've got a question for the audience, which is how many of you feel that you're doing your own media at the moment? Maybe you're running your own YouTube channels, maybe you're doing all your own tweeting, you're doing all of that kind of stuff. Who's doing all their own media? A few of you? Who's paying people to do their media? Oh, no one in the room. Okay. That's kind of one of the questions I've got for you lot, and again, particularly you two, because I'm aware of kind of what you do. What's the difference in terms of going to a PR company, getting that PR company to come up with a proper plan and then making those approaches, or just coming raw as the gamer and straight to the journalists? How do you, I'm kind of thinking there might be split here.
I think, from my perspective, I speak to a lot of indie game developers, and I speak to a lot of big publishers, and it's down to the objectives. What are you trying to achieve? You mentioned corporate PR and getting the company well known and everything else. So that can be one objective. So many indies come to us wanting PR to drive downloads, and it doesn't. And so, you know, everything else we do will augment any user acquisition activity, but the bottom line is that PR is the basics, the fundamentals, building reputation, the awareness, getting, you know, great recruits, all the others, all the good stuff, and really augmenting what you're doing in terms of user acquisition. So I'd say, you know, you have to really think about what you want to achieve first before you even think about why you're using PR at all.
Okay.